This is my 100th episode in this podcast. It's absolutely insane to think about. Good night. I really just started this on a whim for the most part. I've talked about it before. I was sitting with a colleague of mine and they encouraged me to just start doing these short 3-minute episodes. And I started, very, very basically, and then it grew and developed and hopefully have improved a little bit. It's been a real joy. So I just want to acknowledge that this milestone. And I also want to thank you as human beings listening to this, watching this on YouTube. I can't thank you enough. I hear you and I see you when you comment and when you DM me, and it just makes my heart swell every time I get connected to somebody who's out there listening and watching. So my sincere gratitude goes to you for taking the time out of your life to even be bothered listening and hearing these stories and these thoughts and reflections. So thank you. I want to kind of consider some of the work that I've done in policy over the years. Now, I think I could say that policy is the one area I've worked in for the majority of my career. Really, policy and technology, those two areas I've kind of worked in for the majority of my career. And I got my start in policy pretty early. I took an American government class in high school, and they taught us a little bit about law and legislation. I hated it. It was the worst class. Maybe my teacher, I don't know what it was. It was probably just me. I had a bad attitude. But I carried that through to my undergraduate degree. I had to take business law, and I hated business law so much. It was just the worst class I had to take. Again, probably not the teacher, probably just me having a bad attitude about it. It wasn't until I got into graduate school, into my master's degree, and I was taking a health policy class, and the teacher was amazing. And it was an interdisciplinary course. So even though I was in the public health department, it was a course that was offered in the nursing department. So I was sitting there with a whole bunch of nurses who were getting their master's degree in nurse practitioners, and they were getting their master's degree in like family nursing and things like that. I don't know the different nursing fields, so I'm sorry if I'm misrepresenting. But it was just me and a room full of these nurses studying for their master's degree. And I was really kind of, I had a lot of fun with it. It was really cool being kind of the only one who was studying public health in that room. And I remember the teacher kind of zeroing in on me, probably because I was the only public health student there, but she kind of encouraged me to participate in class. She encouraged me to share my insights and my thoughts. She was always kind of calling me out or calling me in to have a discussion. And I remember absolutely vividly one day, I responded to some question she had asked, probably completely off-topic answer, but that's just generally my MO. When somebody asks me a question, I kind of process the question, and then I think about what an answer could be, and then I think of 4 or 5 other answers, and I usually go for the most obscure, ridiculous answer that I think is the most compelling, interesting, and then the person's usually left there going, but why that you didn't answer my question? My poor students, oh my gosh, I feel so bad for them sometimes. Anyway, so she had asked a question, I answered it with some bizarre answer, more than likely, and she looks at me and she says, you know what, I believe that you're going to be a policy wonk one day. And I kind of simultaneously was flattered and took offense because I didn't know what policy wonk was, but I knew I had heard it on the news, and I wasn't too happy with the kind of affiliation with some like politicking kind of person. And what I wanted to do, which I felt was a lot more wholesome, which was a lot more about empowering communities and helping people and making sure that everyone has access to health and healthcare. So anyways, I kind of just said, oh yeah, that sounds good. And then we moved on. I later Googled what policy wonk was, and I found out I was just somebody who knows about policy. That's basically it. And so I didn't really act on it, or certainly not right away. It was just something that someone had told me, and I was like, oh, okay. I put it in the back of my head, and then maybe one day I'll do something. And honestly, there have been so many times where that's happened to me in my life, and I think that if you have somebody in your life who's like, oh, you would make a good this, or you would make a good that, listen to them. Chances are 9 times out of 10, even if you don't don't believe it right then, somehow, some way, you're going to wind up down that road. I don't know how it is or how it happens. Maybe it's just confirmation bias. I don't know. But people have told me since I was young that you're going to be a teacher. I became a teacher. This teacher had told me I was going to become a policy wonk. I did policy for most of my career. So yeah, I ended up doing a master's thesis in health law policy. So there I was doing policy research as my focus of my thesis. I ended up working for many years for a think tank, more or less, doing policy research there. I enjoyed the hell out of it. I really, really loved it. It was so fun to consider looking at policy information as kind of data, so the policy text as data itself, and trying to understand it from either a qualitative perspective, so understanding the themes that are associated, the ideas that are captured, the intentions, the value systems captured in a policy, and then look at it also quantitatively, like even just basic stuff like how many times did they use this word in that policy? I mean, these are all really, really interesting ways of picking apart and studying policy. And so it was, I guess, not a huge surprise that when I ended up doing my doctorate, I started studying policy implementation. Now, it was really funny because the title of my proposal for my doctorate was something about policy implementation. I don't remember the original title, but policy implementation was in the title, and I had no clue what policy implementation was. I didn't even know what it meant. All I knew was it had said policy implementation in my job description when I had applied for my doctorate, but it wasn't really something that I had any reflection on or any kind of understanding of. It was just, I kind of figured what implementation was, and I know what policy is, so I kind of, deduced it, but I didn't really know it in depth, and I didn't take a lot of time to learn about it until much later in my doctoral studies. Should have been that I should have hit that right off the bat, but no, I waited a couple of years and let it kind of marinate inside of me until I realized I knew nothing about implementation. I started studying it, and okay, it comes down to basically the fact that you're putting policy into practice. But in doing so, it also means you're taking the value systems that are kind of behind that policy and articulating them in a way where people can act on them. And I think that's a really, really cool and interesting approach to understanding policy. So that part of my career really changed my policy angle from looking specifically at the way policies are structured in looking more into way policies are put into practice, are acted upon, the kind of outputs and outcomes of policy. And that became absolutely fascinating because here I am now thinking, my studies in my master's degree were just trying to understand what the heck a policy kind of is, what shape it takes, what are the characteristics it has. And now I'm looking at my doctoral studies, how does that look like when somebody acts upon it, when there's a human behavior and actor and some intention behind doing it. And that was, I fell in love with that. I've spent a lot of my academic career just studying that specific facet of policy and implementation. And it keeps coming up over and over again, both in my academic and my entrepreneurial careers, this issue of implementation. I think a lot of the social problems that we have are be due to challenges, difficulties, externalities associated with the implementation process, with how we put something into practice. So it was really unique that I got to use my doctoral studies to understand a little bit more and to apply to the world around me. I kind of immediately started seeing the failures where implementation wasn't happening or where it wasn't happening to the way it was intended to happen, if you could say that, if you could speak of such a thing. So I guess the takeaway here is this. If you're like me, you live by a certain set of rules. You have kind of these rules in your head, and some of them are written down, like I have my schedule that's written down. Some of them are unwritten. They're kind of like the way I think and the way I act. And then putting those rules into practice as part of our daily lives. And I think that whomever is responsible for writing or setting down those rules, it's important for us to interrogate the process of rule making, rule changing, and then, of course, the putting it into practice, the implementation side of things. So I think about this a lot in my own life. I think about the rules that I create. I think about the unwritten rules, the kind of assumptions behind the rules that are part of my life. And I really try to reflect on that and interrogate that. So I guess, I think this is your call to action now. Take 5 minutes, set a timer for 5 minutes. I want you to do a meditation. And I want you to think about the unwritten rules that you live by. What are the things that you abide by? What are kind of the actions that you take that are part of your mindset, your way of thinking, but that are unwritten, completely unwritten? Maybe they're part of your value system. Maybe they're part of your beliefs. And start thinking about who made those rules, who decided that those rules should be a thing. Maybe it's a group of people that just all together agreed on something. Maybe it's just a person who set down that rule. Try to think about where you learned those rules from and really critically evaluate how do those rules that you live by every day reflect your value systems, the things that you believe in.